Everyone, welcome to the January 13th, 2022 voting meeting of the Keystone Central School District. We will start with the salute to the flag and a moment of silence.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Stop taking Jardiance and find your doctor right away if you have symptoms of this infection, acidosis, or allergic reaction, and don't take it if non-dialysis. Taking Jardiance with a sulfonylurea or enzyme low blood sugar.
All right, roll call, please. Mrs. Donahue. Mr. Elling,
Yep. Present.
Mr. Johnston,
Here.
Mr. Koch,
Present.
Ms. Lynch,
Present.
Mr. Miller,
Here.
Mr. Knopf,
Here.
Mrs. Smith. Here. And Mr. Strauss.
Here.
8 members present. Thank you. The board held an executive session last week after the work session from 9:11 to 9:44 for personnel and legal matters. And we're going to start our presentations. We're going to switch them around. We're going to start with the school director recognition.
Thank you. In honor of the commitment and time that school board directors volunteer on behalf of our schools and communities, January is designated School Director Recognition Month. The work of these public servants is vital to the success of our students and our schools. Whether you are voting on budgets, adopting policy, or conducting comprehensive planning, school board members, or you folks, make key decisions that drive public education. As you know, the work is both complex and diverse. In fact, school directors devote an average of 10 hours each month to school board business. Of course, this has only been made more challenging by the pandemic and the related issues affecting the well-being of our students and their families. Board service is unpaid, and school directors are often motivated to pursue the role out of a desire to benefit their community. The majority of school directors indicate their primary reason for serving is to give back or to contribute to public education, or to improve the educational outcome for our students. In fact, across the state, approximately 42% of all school directors serve on the school board of the same school district where they attended. And I know many of you are the same. As you all know, school directors are locally elected officials. You focus on improving the community in which you live. They are our fellow neighbors, local leaders, coworkers, parents, and friends. The success of our schools is a collective interest. And so on behalf of Dr. Martin and all of the staff in the Keystone Central School District, we would like to take this time to show you, our school directors, the deepest appreciation and gratitude for the time and effort that you put toward the success of our students. Your efforts help ensure that each student has an opportunity to thrive and that our public schools remain pathways to a bright future. And as a small token of our appreciation, you can see there are personalized tumblers on the table in front of you. You can feel free to leave them for future meetings and we'll make sure they're taken care of appropriately, or if you want to take them with you, that's fine as well. But again, on behalf of Dr. Martin and the staff, thank you all for all of your time and effort. We know you put a lot of time with meetings and whatnot, and we just appreciate that all very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mark, for taking that load this evening. I know how many hours our administrative team puts in to district operations and functioning, and we, we're on the pay salary, and we're getting paid to do those things. But I also know how many hours the members of this board put in their committee work and just the amount of time reading agendas and information. And so I just greatly appreciate all of the things that you do for our school community.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so we will move on to the budget presentation.
Chad, do you want to share the presentation?
Did you want me to play the video?
Oh, yes.
Oh. no.
Okay.
Okay.
Oh,
Yeah.
sorry.
We have another special treat for you. Sorry, Tracy, we didn't tell you that.
Okay.
Thank you, Mrs. Smith.
Thank you, Mrs. Lynch.
Thank you, Mrs. Donahue.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. Thank you, Mr. Koch.
Thank you, Mr. Alley.
Thank you, Mr. Knopf.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Strauss. Thank you, school board, for all your hard work.
Thanks for always doing what's best for the students. Thank you, school board. Even though you don't get enough credit, we know you are helping behind the scenes. Thank you, school board, for the Bucktail renovations.
Thank you, school board.
Give me an 8. Give me an A. Give me an N. Give me a K. Give me a U. What does it spell? Thank you.
It's School Board Appreciation Month. What should we say to them?
Thank you.
Thank you for supporting career and technical education.
Standing, 2 hands in the air, I'm a champion. You'll be looking up at me when it's over. I live for the battle, I'm a soldier. Yeah.
Thank you.
Put your flag on your back like Ali. Yeah, I'm the greatest, I'm stronger.
Thank you.
I'ma own ya. Hey, I've been working my whole life.
Thank you.
Now it's do or die. I am invincible, unbreakable,
Thank you.
unshakable. They knock me down, I get up again.
Thank you.
You can't hurt me now, I can't feel the pain. I was made for this, yeah, I was born to win.
Thank you.
When they write my story, they're gonna say that I did it for the glory. Don't think that
Thank you.
I did it for the love of the game, yeah. And this is my chance I'm taking. All them old records
That was adorable.
Special thanks to Patty and Megan for helping put that together. Patty, was there anybody else that helped with that that I'm missing? All right, I think we got it.
All right.
They did a great job.
Yes,
Thank you.
they did. Thank you so much.
It always seems so much more special when it comes from our students.
It does.
Definitely.
It does. All right.
Okay, so now to board business. So Chad, if you would mind pulling up that presentation. Before we get started, I just wanted to say that Susan and I are so happy to provide you with yet another budget update as we prepare for not only the next fiscal year, but all of those out years. I know there was some dialogue about our budget outlook last week, and I wanted to be sure to address those issues this evening. First, I wanted to share with you that budgeting is it's an ongoing process. It never stops. But the purpose of budget forecasting, and I believe those are the numbers that Randy was referring to last week, and you'll see those in tonight's presentation for everyone. But the purpose of that budget forecasting is really to guide our fiscal stewardship with the goal of having balanced budgets, having responsible budgets, and also for public transparency. budget forecasting is not to be the intended fiscal plan. So we do see some red numbers in those out years, and they should cause us some concern as we look to those out years. And, just to put it in perspective for you, and, Randy, I think you and I talked about this a little bit, but, 3 years ago, just before I took on the role of your superintendent, I sat in the audience of one of your board meetings, and I listened to a budget presentation that included a budget forecast. And at that time, it was predicted that even with a 3% tax increase, looking forward to the 22-23 school year that we're budgeting for now, the district would have had an $86 million budget with a $7.6 million deficit to close and a fund balance that was in the hole by over $7 million. Between then and now, and what we're going to show you tonight, there was no magic that happened. But what did happen was a whole lot of hard work on behalf of our administration and the solid support of the board members. And I think our board has proven many times over since I've been working with you that you are willing to stand up and make some tough decisions. And I see no reason that wouldn't happen and continue in the future. We've got a great group of people. But what I would say is what we started to do and why we've been able to get where we are in the last 3 years is because we started with our strategic plan. And once we had that plan in place, we were all rowing in the same direction. We aligned our operations and our procedures to the vision of the district and the goals of the district that were approved and prioritized by that group of stakeholders and approved by the board. We aligned our resources to the vision and the goals of the district. That was human resources, fiscal resources, and our material resources. We developed responsible budgets, short-term and long-term projections that align with that comprehensive plan. We've done staffing audits, cost center analysis, and those things have been very beneficial in chipping away out years. I think many of you know we've discussed this at public meetings. We've done some negotiations with our insurance providers and some other vendors that we use to get better pricing. We've taken some huge steps with contracts, as well as our work with the Sugar Valley Charter School. All of those big tasks that we've done have really contributed to chipping away at those red numbers in the future. Every time that we have, since our staffing audit, every time a position is available, it doesn't matter which level of the position, but we make sure, Mark and Susan and I, that before that position is replaced, that we've looked for any possibility that a position would not have to be replaced. When we've added positions, we've looked to be strategic about how can we repurpose positions as opposed to just adding on top. So I feel like we've been doing a pretty great job there. We also identified new areas of revenue that we did not have 3 years ago. They've been proving to be pretty productive for us as well in closing the gaps. So as you see, we're going to update you on where we are now, but I just wanted to make sure that everyone was aware of how did we get from those fiscal outlook years to where we are now. So Susan, I'm going to toss it to you to present since you're there in the room.
Okay. All right, so the first slide, most of you are familiar with. I want to mention that this is dated January 4th because this is the presentation that was given to the Finance Committee last Tuesday. So everything is as of that date. But this first slide is our calendar of events, so to speak. Tonight, we're going over the board resolution that we're asking you to pass. The Act 1 index is at 4.6%, the highest that I've ever seen it in my time here. Basically, that resolution is stating that if you so choose to raise taxes, you won't go above the 4.6%. It is not stating that you are raising taxes. And you'll see later in the presentation that administration is not recommending a tax increase for the 22-23 school year. The next Finance Committee is March 1st and April 5th. They are both open to the public. March 10th, this full board will get their next update. I wanted to go back from our November presentation. I just wanted to do some updates to the year-end fund balance. You saw last week from the auditors that we had approximately $450,000 added to the fund balance. So this is the categories, committed fund balance, amounts, the assigned, unassigned, and total general fund balance there. The unassigned fund balance, your board policy states it should be between 5% and 8%. So as you can see, it is sitting at the 7%. However, Chad, if you go to the next slide, there's a couple resolutions on tonight's board agenda that we're asking you to pass to commit funds. And it's number one is to commit $1 million towards technology enhancement initiatives. The next one is 1.1 million towards future personnel expenses. And then that last one is to move some of the capital project committed dollars from Fund 10 over to Fund 32, which is where we pay for major building projects, renovations, and our 10-year facilities plan. So those three resolutions are on tonight's agenda for vote as well. The next slide gives you a snapshot of what it looks like prior to passing these resolutions, and then what the fund balance would look like, assuming nothing is used in the current fiscal year, what it would look like in June 30 of 2022 after those resolutions were to be passed. You can see the unassigned fund balance would still be within that 5 to 8% range per board policy at 5.23%. So any questions, because those items are all up for vote tonight. So before I move into the next year's update, I wanted to make sure everyone was clear on what we were asking the board to do.
Madam President,
Yes, Mr. Koch.
I just want to make a point that our financial position is not in the dire straits that might have been projected in last week's work session, that we're still sitting in pretty good shape. I wanted to make that emphasis in this public meeting so that there is little anxiety out there in the public that they have no reason to be concerned.
All right, thank you, Mr. Koch. Oh, Mr. Nuff?
Susan,
Chad, if you could go back one more slide while Butch is talking there. Thank you.
I just have a question. What is 1 mil tax about?
Before she would ask me
Sorry.
that. That's okay.
It isn't,
Give me a second while Jackie touches on what she's talking about. I'll pull up the calculation. I just don't want to misspeak.
So that's a great question, Butch, and she'll pull that up for you. I had Chad go back to this slide because these are the things that are up for consideration on tonight's agenda. And I know that I just wanted to make a few comments about this because we believe in those out years, particularly with technology initiatives. We spent with our ESSER funds, we spent a lot of money on technology, replacing old technology that was, at its end of life, but purchasing a lot of laptops, Chromebooks specifically, and teacher laptops. What's going to happen is the lifespan of those Chromebooks and laptops are going to come up all at once. So instead of purchasing on a cycle, which would what the district had originally decided to do, with that extra funding, we were able to purchase a lot of things at once. They're not, and they could all end lifespan at the same time. And Bo, I think you know what I'm talking about. So we believe that it's really important to move this technology and money to committed funds, because we're going to need it in order to help us get back onto a solid replacement cycle.
I'm just kind of curious, didn't we set this up the same thing last year? Or were we just talking about doing it for this year?
We had assigned some fund balance last year. We didn't commit. We didn't take board action to commit dollars, but we did assign, we had a conversation and we assigned some surplus to certain areas. Yep.
Okay, so this is just continuing on That way we have,
This is actual board action to commit monies. And so in order to spend those monies, they have to be spent for the purpose that the board commits them for under the
Okay.
resolution. Yep.
all right,
You can at any time uncommit money and
Mhm.
recommit it towards something else or leave it in unassigned.
okay. I just remember us talking about this once before, and I
Mhm.
was like, well, hold it. I thought this was something that was going to happen every year anyhow.
Yeah.
So, all
The-
right,
Preferably.
And, Susan makes a good point there too, Roger, and thanks for bringing that up. We can assign money and we do that, but we felt pretty important that the board actually would take formal action to commit funds for those future uses. And as Susan said, I mean, the board can take action to change those committed funds for other purposes. So, I mean, the money's already there for you, but I think when you do the budget forecasting, we know for a fact that those technology needs are going to be there in the future. And so this helps give us a little cushion for those out years and those line items.
okay, thank you.
So 1 mil, Butch, the total realizable amount is $1,762,004. Yes, that takes into account the collection percentages, discounts and penalties.
So those personnel expenses, again, you can see the rationale on the slide, but we still are not out of a pandemic. We're not sure how long this is going to last and what some of those unknown impacts are going to be in the future. But we do know that our federal dollars that we have are not going to last forever either. So, we're not counting on those in the future, but this is where we feel we can stretch some of those dollars in pandemic money. And then, of course, the last thing you're all aware of the 10-year facility plan. And, anybody on the facility committee knows that list just keeps growing and things keep popping up. And, it's something we just always have to keep putting money aside. And I know that sometimes it's more important to spend, many times it's more important to spend money on people and not on buildings. However, those buildings are also part of our assets, and we need to make sure that they are maintained appropriately. So we believe that this extra funding will help some of those 10-year plan projects. Any questions on this? Anything board members need to know before they are able to take action on this evening?
I have another question.
Okay.
I need to know what 4.6% would generate.
Oh, so that's not 1 mil.
Not
The
mil,
the
yes.
index is
just
4.6%,
pointing out
approximately
that-
700,000,
4.6 is 700,000.
approximately. Yes,
Okay, thank you.
yes.
4.6 mils would be much, much higher than
Yes.
4.6%.
Yes, you're not legally allowed to raise to 1 mil without a taxpayer referendum voting for such. Yeah.
Okay, well, if board members don't have any other questions right now, we're going to continue to move on. And if you need to stop us to ask more questions, please do.
Okay, so if you, yes, good slide. Okay, so changes from the November presentation to current. We did have some attrition, some retirements come through. We took 4 professional positions and attritioned them out of the budget. There are cost savings built into this for replacing the remaining total positions that we received retirements from. One of those is administrative position, 3 support positions, and 6 professional positions. We will continue to get retirements between now and the end of the year, and we will continue to update and look at those positions, including these, as we go through the process, the student scheduling process. We look at need, we look at course selection, what teaching schedule is needed, and so on and so forth. So that, if it's green, that's good. That's a savings, 594,477. However, at this point in time, with all of the unknowns happening, we moved that savings into the budgetary reserve line item. There are many unknowns with inflation rates. Our bid process is just now starting. We really have I don't believe that it's safe at this point to go off history trend increases because we're in a time when things are increasing beyond anything we've ever seen before. So until we get some actual numbers back, we move this into the budgetary reserve line item. So in total, the net reduction to the general fund expenditures for 22-23 was 0. But we wanted to be clear to show you that part of that savings came out of personnel and was put in a reserve line item. The next slide, there was 1.3 million, approximately a little bit more, put aside for the community feeding initiative that launched March 13th, 2020, the day after the closure. The Sharon Berger and her team started serving community meals the day after we were initially shut down for COVID. ESSER funding was permissible use for that. So we put aside a substantial amount, knowing that that was a high need in our community. After the audit last year and looking at the food service fund and all of the additional money that came through that source, the federal and state food nutrition program, we realized that the supplemental money from ESSER was not needed to support that program. The fund was self-sustainable and could handle that program on its own. So we took this 1.3 million earmarked towards the community feeding program and moved it into the 23-24 budget. So you will see that deficit for 23-24. It was, I believe, 2.8 million in November, and it's now under $1 million. So part of that is because of this revenue that was added, but also that personnel savings that you just saw on the last slide. It rolls out into those future years. As Dr. Martin was just saying, the decisions we make today affect the out years. And so that's one of those things you'll notice on the next slide. So this is the 5-year financial picture that I believe Randy was referring to last week and Dr. Martin was referring to at the beginning of the presentation. Just want to note here that there are a lot of assumptions that are still in these numbers. All figures are approximate. The payroll increases are based on the current CBEs with a percentage, an estimated percentage built in for those bargaining units that are expiring at the end of this year. There's a 7% healthcare benefit increase built into this. That is the national trend. We do not get our certified rate for Keystone Central School District until March. I'm hopeful that the March presentation will include that, but sometimes it's later in March, so we may know that closer to the April presentation.
Susan, just before you go on, let me just insert. Even though we budget at one point, we were budgeting at 8% in that category for out years, and we felt comfortable reducing it to 7% based on the conversations we've had with the provider, as you know, our consortium folks, and the rates that we've been getting. So we felt comfortable reducing that from 8% to 7%.
And that is every year, so it's compounding. So if our rate comes in at 2% this year, that's going to reduce all of those expenditures in the out year accordingly. PSERS rates are listed there for the next 5 years. I think everybody is aware that that is anticipated to stay in the 30s, at least 10 years out. So I don't see any relief coming in the PSERS line item anytime soon. And again, the starting reserve balance is the 16 million. That's prior to tonight's vote and any of those transfers that would take place after the resolutions are passed.
I thought the PSERS rates were supposed to start to stabilize at some point, though.
Stabilize in the 30s.
Well,
if you think
that doesn't look stable to me.
Right. If you think back, if you look at this, I guess one could define this as stabilizing, going up 1% or 2% per year. If you remember, we were jumping, by a
True.
lot every
Huge
year.
jump.
Yeah. you know,
Susan, aren't they-
10% a year.
Aren't they kind of similar to what they were back in like the late '80s, early '90s?
Yeah, I'd have to look that up, Butch,
I'm
but
sorry, that's the whole-
no, yes, you're correct.
it's
They
still
were
stable.
higher and then it dipped way
They said
down.
we were
Yes,
solvent and
yes.
Didn't want to pay their share, so they stopped paying.
Changed the multiplier, made some changes to the plan.
2001.
Yes.
Well,
And I
and-
believe it's been growing since 2008, around that time frame. So, yeah.
And I agreed, I think with what some board members were saying, those red numbers look scary in those out years, but there are a lot of variables and this says if our expenses and our revenues stay as projected, this is what would happen in the out years if we did not change anything else. And so again, I just want to be clear, this outlook, this forecast is not the plan. This forecast is just for transparency and it helps inform the plan.
Dr. Martin, something that scares me even worse than looking at the red numbers out in 23, 24 is if you look at starting in 21, 22 and look at the money that's being used from the ESSER grant money. So that money is being used to replace our money. So, you know, looking across it is $15 million right there that we would have had to take from our budget or our reserve fund.
Well, and the only thing I would say to that, which is because of the pandemic, we've had additional expenditures that we would not have otherwise had. So yes, it was money in and it was money out. And we tried to be very strategic about how we use that money because we knew, like any type of stimulus money, that it's a one-time amount of money. And it really does raise the total budget. You know, if we get like every grant we get, even though it's money in, money out, it raises our overall budget number. So I agree with you. I think it looks, and that's why we want to be very transparent with you and the public about where those ESSER funds are. And the previous slide shows you exactly how we spent those funds and where we put that money. We've been coming in under budget, which allows us to push some of that money over to committed funds or assigned funds for those future years. That helps us spread that out a little bit. So we've tried to supplant some existing costs, which is why we are coming out under budget.
In some cases, Dr. Martin and Mrs. Blesh, wouldn't you also say that a lot of the money that was spent and is being spent of ESSER funds, we probably wouldn't have spent that had we not gotten the ESSER grant. It's just like, well, we have the money, we have to use it, so.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And with so many unknowns, I'm sorry, Randy, we come over budget on some things and under budget on some things. And, you know, there was also stipulations about how we had to spend that money. So we spent, you know, a big chunk of it has to be spent on professional development. And the amount of time that we spent developing the staff, that's again, one-time expenses.
Susan. Quick question with your expertise. Basic definition of a balanced budget. Expenses equal revenue, correct? This is where my questions came up last week, actually, guys. ESSER funds, which are part of the income, aren't every year. You know what I mean? Like, in other words, grants aren't every single year we can count on getting a grant.
Right.
So there's our real income, which is our tax base, basically. Then there's our, and what we get from the government. Then there's our expenses. So my big concern is following up with what Butch just said. We're using ESSER grants to offset, and I understand what Bo just said. We spent more money based upon some of those ESSER grants also, but in the long run, it's not sustainable having a $5 million difference between our expenses and revenue. Now, next year it's a little better.
Right.
And I went back and I looked at 2019 when Susan did the budget report back then. Things are better. I'm not going to lie. I mean, our projected expenses back then were 85 million for this coming year. It's actually now showing 82 million. So that's definitely better.
Yeah.
Our income is better. I'm not taking away from any of that. Both sides are better. But the problem is we still have a big difference between our expenses and our revenue. So I guess my whole comments trying to lead up to last time was we can't, it's great to use the ESSER funds to offset. It was great to use the money from the bond to do repairs that the district never did because it never had the money. And it just worries me that we're going to be back in that same boat again in a couple of years. That's really what I was trying to get at, is once this ESSER funding's gone, and let's say there's, and there's no other grants because they're not reoccurring. If we're still looking at a $5 million difference between our expenses and revenue, that is not a good thing. And I guess that's really what I was trying to get across. And, and that's why we're really dramatic to try to make a point and try to get everybody's attention to it. But that's a serious issue. And I just think, and I agree with Jackie. I think that they've done a good job. Many of the jobs that have been created came at the fact that somebody else, maybe another place, they offset jobs. In other words, like if we hired 5, well, then 5 people left or something, retired or whatever. So I think there's been a good effort being put into that, but that doesn't change the different, even this year alone. If you just look at this year, which we know our numbers, Susan, right? I could safely say 21-22 budget is safely, those numbers are pretty much accurate. There's a $5 million difference. I don't know how much of that we could contribute to with the ESSER funding, that we have the extra money maybe we wouldn't have spent, but it worries me that it's probably not quite $5 million. Maybe we would have spent 2 million less. Well, then we're still short $3 million.
Well,
So I guess that's what I'm trying to get at.
And that does kind of extend out to 24-25 when there's no ESSER funds coming in.
Right.
One would expect the expenses to be lower.
Yeah, we hope to be lower. I just don't know
Yeah,
whether.
and they will be. There's no doubt they will be.
Right.
But we can't take those numbers out right now in the projections because, we don't, there's certain information and things that have to change and happen for those out years to come down. And that's why it's just important. Randy, you are spot on, and that's the whole purpose of this budget forecast, is that we need to know if we don't do anything and we're not careful with our planning and our processes, that it could be dire in the out years because of the things listed on the top of that slide that are fixed things based on this scenario. Now, Susan could run a separate slide with assuming a tax increase and what does that look like in the out years. But I really feel, and because of the COVID money, Susan and I are not recommending a tax increase for the upcoming year because we just feel that it would be unethical when we can have a balanced budget. And the reason we, again, blocked out that ESSER grant fund line in green is to show you where that money is and exactly how it's been spent. We want public transparency with those dollars and to show you that we realize that they're one-time dollars and how we were using them. But you're exactly right that those out year, that has to change. And as I mentioned before we started, in that 22-23 column 3 years ago, the predicted budget was $86.2 million. So we were predicted to be at $86.2 million, and that was without ESSER funding. So we have to chip away at those out years and those ongoing costs. I feel we have a good process to do that. And I don't want anyone to panic because we are in a good place, as Mr. Koch said. But again, this is just kind of to keep us aligned and be fiscally responsible. Yeah, Elizabeth.
Thank you. Welcome back.
Thank you.
I'm just curious, and please, I don't want to waste time and you have to go into too many details, but I might have missed, why is a projected 3 million jump between 23 and 24 fiscal years?
So all of the bulleted points at the top of the slide that Susan went over contribute to those projections. Some of them are firm percentages, but again, those percentages depend on how many employees we have, healthcare collective bargaining agreements. And right now, because we don't have any future agreements in the works, we know that we have to say, if the existing collective bargaining agreements were to continue as is, that is what it's going to look like in the future, along with a predicted 7% benefit increase. Susan, did I explain that right?
Yes. Yep, it's cumulative. So, doing nothing next year, your expenses are always going to be more than they are this year. just because there's built-in increases annually.
Elizabeth, one of the good examples, that if you guys remember, I think 2 years ago, we were ever able to get a 4% benefit increase. The minute we got that 4% budget, or I'm sorry, 4% benefit increase instead of an 8%, that impacted all the out years tremendously. Not only the initial budget, but all the out years, because then it would have been 4% this year. Instead of 888, it would have been 4888. So all of those changes that we make really chip away those out years significantly. Yeah, keep going.
Oh, thank you. Okay, I swear, you're right where I am. You're right where I am. So that would be my question. Which committee, or would it just be administration in the future to get that 7% benefit increase down, down, down? Is that a committee thing, or is that a administrative thing? But that's actually what I've got my eye on personally.
Yeah, so that's what, and I think we've shared that with you in the past, and it's in the slideshows. You can go back and show when we get to when we show you different slides, we show you what contributed to things going up or down. And that was a big one, I think 2 years ago, because Susan and I sat down and we negotiated hard with our provider, and we actually shopped around, and we ended up getting a better price from the existing, but those are administrative works. But it's work that we're doing, but we share not only with the finance committee, but with the whole board and all of the budget updates. And then the other thing too, to kind of address your question, and I know this was talked about a little bit last week as well. I believe it's the responsibility of every single administrator to think about, and we've talked about this administratively since I got here. Anybody that has ideas for revenue increases and expenditure decreases, bring them forward. We're going to use them. And we did use them. We used a lot of them. Then we firm them up, we bring them back to the board, and you supported it. One of those ideas that came from our staff was the business privilege tax. That has been panned out to be a very significant increase in revenue for us. And it's not just this year or last year, but it's going to impact all future out years as well. And so those type of decisions, again, we are not looking at 1 year budget decisions ever. We know when we make a decision, how is it going to impact those out years? And I know I keep saying the same thing, but I really want the board to feel confident that we are doing those things and looking for changes in revenue and expenses all the time. Every single position that's vacated for any reason at all is scrutinized before it's even posted or filled. And so it's something that we do ongoing. Another area that we've been focusing on is trying to make some good decisions on how do we reduce those outside placements of students, because we know that's a big cost area. And something that Susan and I and Mark are going to do is, along with Joni, is dive really deeply into some statistics with regards to a Forecast 5 product that we have to compare ourselves and our line item spending against other districts. So we're going to search out at least 6 other districts that are comparable in demographics and size, and rural districts, and we're going to compare how is our spending compared to like neighbors, so to speak, across the Commonwealth. And I think that also gives us an idea of some areas that we may, if we're out of skew somewhere, how do we get those things back in balance? Little checks and balances for us. And then we'd like to do that work and then come back and share that with the finance committee and the board, because that's what you pay us to do.
I have to jump in. Now that is super exciting news. As you all know, I'm a data woman, okay? When you can cost compare analysis, and I'm hoping to help you, maybe PSBA or someone out there has already collected a lot of data, so you can just dive right in. That's really exciting. It's probably the most exciting news I've heard in a long time. Thank you.
It's a data analytic tool that we purchased in 2019 or 2020 to help us with these things. And then also beginning, and this might be on your next slide, Susan, beginning next week, Susan and I will start our line by line item budget meetings with all budget heads. So again, in our operating budget, we look at every single request and expenditure. We look at historic spending and any future predicting spending. Every single line item in the operating budget annually. So I just want to give you some comforts that you can trust that we are not just, we don't feel like we're lucrative and we have the ability to spend whatever we want to. We're really spending super cautiously, even though you see those big dollars.
Yes, Butch.
I just, looking across here, I know historically, anytime grant money paid to create a program, hire personnel, fund programs, it's something that seems like the district is stuck with throughout the years then. So if this ESER's money is, the stimulus money was put into the budget and it's being used, is it something we're looking at possibly going away in 2024? Or is this the reason our budget's still that high is because we're continuing those programs?
Chad, would you mind going back to the previous slide? Thank you. I think this slide shows you exactly what all the different, obviously all the different ESSER grants that came through. We were very fortunate to get this money. We never counted on this money when we were budgeting for current years and so forth, but it has enabled us to do some things that we wouldn't otherwise do. One of the programs that I would tell you we've been doing is the summer program. So in addition to extended school year for special needs students, we've also been running, actually during the school year, after school and summer, we ran programs, summer programs that included transportation. And so that was very costly, and meals, 2 meals. We had hundreds of kids participate in those programs. Those are programs that we know we may not be able to continue when we get through COVID, but we also know that the learning loss that we're spending, that hopefully the gap for the learning loss is closed. But the other possibility is that we would replace that grant money to keep the programs going with the 21st Century Grant, which we are not currently getting. But that's something that's been out there for several years. And our plan in the future is either to discontinue that summer program or to look at the 21st Century Grant. But you are exactly right, spot on. When you get one-time money, if you're going to put it in salary, you're going to put it in programs, you got to have a plan for when the money runs out.
Okay, I think we can go to slide 9, which shows some other areas of consideration and some future things that are happening. As Dr. Martin mentioned, the operating budget requests with department heads, those begin next week. We meet with all individuals and look at every line of their budget and the requests that come up through from their staff. We use zero-based budgeting, which I think all of you are familiar with at this point. Doesn't mean they get zero. It means you start at 0 and build the request based off need and justification for the need. Attrition and repurpose of staff, as I said, there's continued retirements coming through, so we will continue to look at those along with the scheduling process through March. Healthcare rates, they will be certified in March as well. We have some contract negotiations that started this week. There's, as far as grant funding and some increases that we've seen because of our demographic changes in our district, our title funding continues to increase. So that those additional revenue dollars have been built into the budget. There's the PA school funding lawsuit. That trial is underway. As well as the PA charter funding legislation that seemed to get a lot of movement prior to COVID and then stalled after COVID hit. But then we also continue to look at our cyber and charter enrollments, as well as the KCSD Virtual Academy. I know Mr. Evie works diligently at contacting outside cyber families to explain to them our offerings and opportunities that they would have available to them should they come into the KCSD Virtual Academy opposed to going to an outside cyber.
And another piece to remember is all of those federal dollars that we were looking at, they're not permitted to be counted in the calculation for cyber charters and charter school tuition. So I do believe that our cyber charter tuition and our charter school tuition rates will decrease somewhat because of the COVID dollars that we were supplanting with. I think our last slide is questions.
Yep. If there are any other questions.
You guys all asked some great questions.
Um,
Good.
May I?
Elizabeth.
May I real quick?
Elizabeth, go ahead.
Oh, thank you. I'm sorry, because I can't see everyone. I don't interrupt. Stellar job communicating, but I'll be honest with you, my heart will sink if we end up having to get rid of any after-school programs for education or the summer program. And if that means increasing taxes to support just that, I'm 100% for it. But I don't want to see those programs cut. And in fact, if anything, I want to see them grow for the kids that need it. So that's my personal input, but thank you so much for this.
I think Jackie touched upon a good way to replace that when we get there with the 21st Century Grant. I know that that's a federal program that we had here in the district in the past, and it ran for several years. It was very successful, and it does pretty much the same thing, my understanding, as the current ESSER program, summer program, and so on. And I think that would, if we do want to continue that, then I think we need to seriously explore that grant when this money goes away. And but you're right, you know, you've seen a lot of these programs that are grant funded, and you get 2 or 3 years of worth of funds, and then what do you do? And I think most, in looking at the slides here, most of the money that was spent with the ESSER funds are not things that we are going to be forced to continue. The technology and some of that stuff we certainly have to replace, and that's why we're moving that, committing that money for that purpose. But I think most of the money that we spent on that, a good chunk of it, I think, was $10 million, was on that learning loss prevention, and that's through the summer program and so on. So I think that we aren't going to be stuck with a lot of things that we can't fund. So,
Jeff, and your comments triggered another thought of mine, is that we did spend a lot of money on some curricular materials
right.
that we were able to do sooner rather than to push off into out years. And that's also been helping us close the gap, particularly textbooks and new curriculum that's been approved. We've had the funding to buy what we need. And again, not going crazy with it, but moving to digital textbook subscriptions along with a smaller number of hardback textbooks. And so having the funds to do that, we were able to do those things sooner. So again, that type of curriculum replacement's been super helpful. It helped us buy the ECRI and Hegarty programs that we added to our elementary literacy program, and some other things that we would not have been able to do with one-time money had we not used those COVID dollars. So I don't feel like the COVID dollars bailed us out of any problem. It allowed us to do some other things much sooner and use them in those one-time huge expenditures.
The only thing else, even if we raise taxes up to the index, instead of roughly $700,000.
Could you speak into the microphone, please?
I'm sorry, my stomach's too fat. I can't get any closer.
You can pull the mic in, Bert.
Yeah, that'll work. Even if we raise the taxes to the index of $700,000, in 2 years, we can't raise enough money. So we have to look at something to do something. I mean, the index, if we go tonight to support the, not going over the index, that limit to below $700,000 you can raise. So it's something you have to look at in 2 years.
Yep. And, Randy, I think you mentioned something as well as, not just using the fund balance to balance the budget. because that can get you into trouble. And so again, with that, but it's nice to have a healthy fund balance in a good place that in the event that unknown expenditures come up. But our goal is not to balance budgets using the fund balance. The goal is to keep your fund balance in a healthy spot in the unfortunate situation coming down the future, but not intended to use it to balance budgets. We would avoid that at all costs.
I would ask that maybe the finance committee meet again next month. Talk more about the budget, invite all the board members, to please have the opportunity to attend too. I mean, there's still some more things I'd like to discuss, but I'm not going to drag it out tonight. But honestly, there's just a few more things I'd like to, look at some of the older numbers, some of the older budgets, like you said, in the previous years, because I mean, you would notice that 2018, 2019, the actual expenses were 72,786,000, but yet our revenue was 74. So we actually had a budget surplus, actual in 2018, 2019, but yet we go to this year's budget and our expenses have increased $10 million. That really scared. I mean, and now I'm also accepting the fact that some of that 10 million is definitely COVID related.
Right.
But so some of the funding that we're using to pay off the difference between the expense and, I mean, there's just some things I think we'd like to talk about rather than dragging it out right now.
Sure. Randy, just to give you a quick idea about that, that was the year, that was the fiscal year that I came in February.
Okay.
And Susan can tell you, I stopped all spending in March, if not the end of February, in March, beginning of March, because we said, look, we can't just keep spending money unless we know where it is. And that's when we started the cost center analysis and we stopped spending, which is why, we didn't stop student trips or anything like that. But as far, if you had budgeted for something and you didn't order it by March 1st, you clearly didn't need it.
No, I heard you stopped all the pencils and the paper and the crayons.
No, we didn't.
No, I heard all that.
You did not hear that because the warehouse was full. But in all honesty, that was part of the reason for that immediate surplus. Plus, that was also the first year following the mass furloughs. And I agree, we will make sure we are not in that position again. I feel very confident that our team can work together with our board and make sure that we are not in that position again. We know what kind of impact that had on the morale of our district and with our community, and we are committed to not ever being in that situation again.
Madam President,
Yes, Mr. Koch.
the beauty of grants is that it's not like a loan, so it's something we don't have to pay back. And so even though these grants run out, I think that this should encourage us to seek more grants. The more grants we get, the better. Because it's money that it's not like a loan. The grant is given, the money is given to us, we don't have to pay it back, we use it. And so I would encourage the administration to seek as many grants as we could possibly get.
I agree. They're nice to supplement our student learning in different projects that we might not be able to afford otherwise. Anyone else?
Randy, I like the idea of the finance committee meeting again. Who's our chair?
That'd be Butch.
That's Butch. Okay. Well, Butch, if you feel like you want to pull something together or when that works for you, let us know and we'll get that organized.
They're typically quarterly, but I think at this time of year, a monthly isn't a bad idea since we are doing the budget.
Yeah, right.
Mhm.
Well, and especially if I get the sense that some board members are thinking that we may need to look at some kind of a tax increase. And if that's if that's what you're thinking, the sooner we know that, the better we can pull those slides together for you. I'm comfortable right now without a tax increase, potentially even for the following year. But if that's not where our board members are, you need to let us know so that we can start pulling different data for you.
I'd like to say that I would be comfortable with a tax increase if it weren't for some of the actions that some of the municipalities may have taken in the area. Mr. Strauss, I think that probably impacts you directly.
Yeah, it does. Taxes went up a little bit. Rogers did.
So typically our finance, well, we'll set a
We'll
date
talk
and
it.
time, yeah. For
But
committee.
the only thing I will say, so no one's surprised, I plan on voting against and having Gay 4 pulled for the referendum, voting against it, because I believe we need to try to have a referendum, let the people tell us what they want. Let them, if they want a tax increase, let them vote for a tax increase. If not, they can tell us what programs to cut. So I think we have to let the people tell us what to do, let them decide. 'Cause I'm tired of hearing people second guess everything. So let them put it on a ballot and let them decide what they want to pay and what they want to cut.
I think the motion though, is not whether or not to go to referendum. It
No,
just
it's not
says,
to exceed, it's not to exceed the index. But if we don't exceed, if we don't vote for that resolution, then you're saying you're going to exceed the index of 4.6. So I'm saying let's go over it and let the,
actually, if we're doing anything between a 0 increase and up to the index, there is no referendum.
correct.
Just want to make sure, okay.
But if the resolution fails, then it's saying that we're going to go over the 4.6, which would mean we have to do all kind of other work, Susan. And actually, I think it goes to a voter referendum and
And
you have
what
to
kind-
plead your case.
And what kind of a pay jump or what kind of a tax increase is that going to be to the people in our constituency?
Let them decide. They can just say
No,
zero.
because whenever we put it on a referendum, it's going to have at a certain point. It's not, well, you guys write in on the ballot how much you want. It's going to be, we decide, and then they vote whether they want that.
And you have to have public hearings before that. You have to have all kind of meetings prior to, so let the discussion begin. So,
But we don't need to go there because I
Yeah,
don't,
why would we
Yeah.
need to go there if we don't need it now? I mean, I used to be 0, 0, 0, 0. And then I got educated by Ms. Blesh about how, if you don't raise it every year, you lose that money in out years. All right. But since then, now she's educated me along with Dr. Martin that, we don't need to do that if we're watching how we're spending our money. And that's what they're doing.
I agree with you, Roger. I think that typically what you said before is how you would operate. Incremental tax
Right.
increases along the way. But I think we've gotten to the point now where we're in a good enough shape based upon all the things that they have done up to this point that we can, especially given all the craziness right now with the unknowns for people, to throw a tax increase on them right now, I think would be, putting salt in the wounds. And if we do vote not to, we vote this down and we say that means you're telling everybody that, we can have carte blanche here. We'll increase it 5%. Well, if you go to referendum, as well as I do, they'll vote it down. And then where are you? You're back to back to 0 again.
I'm not current on it, but last I heard, there was only ever one that actually successfully passed the referendum. Has that been changed, Susan? Do you know of?
State College.
There was one.
that was tied to a building
Right.
construction project.
So it's not, all I'm saying is we have to seriously look at this, because if you look, like Randy said, down the road to the 25, 26, we're seriously in the red. So we have to let people know between now and then, we're seriously in the red. I'm not in favor of raising taxes. I don't want to raise taxes. I'm not in favor of cutting programs, but we have to do something. And I'm tired of all the Facebook people out there telling us that we need to cut this, we need to cut that, we spend way too much. So I thought, put it out there, let them decide. If they want to raise taxes, I think the year they spent homeschooling their kids opened a lot of eyes. So,
Well, here would be a question. Susan, get the calculator back out. Please. Assume 4.6 tax increase. Do you have a way to indicate what kind of an increase that would be per $100,000 of property value?
Maybe not on the spot.
No, not right. I mean, not right here, not right now.
Okay.
But are you asking me what I have? I already have numbers figured out if there was a 3% tax increase or a 1.75%
Well, let's say
increase,
3.
like- Okay, so just go with that. It's 700,245 for a 3% tax increase.
Okay,
And then it's compounding. So, every single
Right.
year.
right. But what I'm wondering is,
What it would be per $100,000
Oh, per the parcel?
individual,
Yeah.
individual
Okay,
taxpayer.
hold on. Impact. I may have that.
1.046 times whatever you're paying now.
Mhm.
Should be in the area of $50 for the average, because if I remember correctly, when we did a partial the first year, it generated $500,000.
Yeah, depending on the
Just 20
count,
some,
anywhere.
$20 to $30 a person.
Yeah,
Well, what's our current millage at?
44.45 for Center, 13.5 for Clinton, 46.24 for Potter.
Okay, that was, okay, and that was what for Clinton?
Millage,
Yeah,
13.5.
13.5?
Mhm.
Okay. Okay, so that's 1350 per per 100,000. So 0.046. That would add 0.46% would actually be a tax increase of about $197 per. That can't be right. Never mind.
We can get those numbers for the
I think
finance committee.
If we're
Um,
gonna, yeah, if we're
That's
gonna
what
have
we
the
want to do. Well, I have all of those templates.
heads.
It's just updating them and getting accurate
Yeah, before-
information.
Well,
so-
what I'm
People in
saying
the
is,
crowd
if
like
it's,
the
say
rest
it's gonna be say the 4.6 would be, we'll just throw it out there, say $70 more per person or per $100,000 worth of property value. Does the board have the stomach to throw that or more on anyone?
No, as you said, I'm not in favor of tax increase.
So
I just,
I just don't understand what the purpose of voting down the resolution is when we know what the end result is gonna be, is it's gonna be 0, right where we are now.
Right.
Right.
That's what it's-
I'm
I think it's
basically
a
making
way
a
just to
statement
get
that I'm
people to
against it, and I
realize
think if we want the people to tell us, let them decide what we need to do. I mean, obviously, we're gonna have to cut about $1 million out of the budget here real soon. So where are we cutting that $1 million from? Let someone tell us where to, so.
We do have processes and procedures, and obviously, like I said, we work with the board to figure out what those things are. And again, having a comprehensive plan allows us to align our fiscal responsibilities with the goals of the district. And so the plan, instead of just having the people from the public pick and choose what they believe we should be cutting, we've let the people be part of that comprehensive planning process and input, and then we use that to make those decisions. So that's kind of, I know some talk was going on about the task force, but that's really, we're in a different place than when we needed to have the task force. But I am wide open to any ideas or suggestions that any members of the public would like to send our way, along with any board members. Feel free to email those to me, and we will also share them with the finance committee.
Well, I think one of the best things to do is stop looking at Facebook.
Amen.
Don't look at Facebook. You're not going to see any of that crap that they're saying. Let them talk to you face to face.
Okay,
Madam President,
yes, Mr. Coke.
it's my understanding that we're in what is called a representative democracy. We were voted onto this board by the voters to represent them. And so at a certain point, we have to make decisions of what we think is best for the taxpayers and for the students, maintaining that balance act all the time. So even though it's important to understand what the people seem to want, at a certain point, we've got to make our decisions as their representatives of what we think is best for them. And that's a representative democracy.
Well said, Wayne.
Thank you, Mr. Cope.
Right.
I'd just like to put out there what Mr. Koch said. He said we're a representative democracy. That is not true. We are a representative republic. Thank you.
So any other comments or questions on the budget? If not, we can move on. And I just encourage if any board members or public have any suggestions or questions, if you can get them to Dr. Martin or your representative on the board as soon as possible, we can go over it at the Finance Committee meeting.
Great. Thanks, everyone. I thought that was a great dialogue tonight and a lot of really good questions and deep thought. And thank you again for everything you're putting into this.
Thank you. Okay. Moving on, our hearing of visitors. David Dornish signed up again. David, are you still on or did you hop off?
He dropped off.
Okay. All right. So we will move on to the superintendent's report.
Okay, just let me pull up a new screen. I just have a very brief report for you this evening. One piece of good news, and that would be the Pennsylvania Association of Rural and Small Schools, otherwise known as PARS, recently announced the winners of their annual grant program. Among the winners was Central Mountain music teacher Ashley Crest. She took it upon herself to apply for this grant, and she was awarded $1,799.65. She plans to host an electronic musical instrument workshop for our students. The workshop does feature a community member, Brian Dowdy, who'll be working with our students to create music through technology. I've seen this happen before, and what a great opportunity and a great way to use that small grant to bring in an extra opportunity for kids. Obviously, I wanted to address some of the pandemic numbers with you as well. The decision for closing our secondary schools to in-person learning for 5 days was made yesterday at noon with our administrative team. The rationale for moving to remote learning for only our secondary schools was based on the 5% threshold that was recommended to us by the Pennsylvania Department of Health, along with PDE, and our known positive case counts. To give you some perspective on those case counts, the total number of known cases among elementary school students in the past 2 weeks, which is since we came back from the break, is a total of 25 students, compared to the secondary number, which totaled 103 students. And our staff numbers only totaled 15. So we believe that taking a 5-day break with only 3 instructional days being impacted will be helpful in preventing further infections, therefore reducing the number of contacts and quarantines. And unless you have any questions for me, that's all I have for this evening.
All right, thank you. So we'll move on to committee reports. Did safety and security meet since last week?
Yes, we did. And it was in that executive session.
All right, thank you. Mr. Koch, do you have a policy committee report?
We met yesterday. We covered more than 20 items in the continuing in the 800 series of policies. And you'll see on the agenda tonight about 8 other policies that are there for second read and to be passed tonight to become policy. Our next policy committee meeting will be on the second Wednesday in February, which I believe is February 9th, if my memory serves me correctly. Let me check. Yeah, February the 9th will be the next policy committee meeting at 10 o'clock in the morning. And this is open to the public. so any board member can come in and see that policy committee in action. I want to thank Mrs. Lynch and Mark Kondo and Christina Manning and all the rest of the administration that was there at the committee meeting. They did a yeoman's job. We worked pretty hard, covering more than 20 items yesterday. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Cope. All right. Moving on. So we still have the treasurer's report, financial report, and enrollment report on there. Any questions or comments on that? Okay, Mr. Strauss.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the regular voting meeting agenda, except for those items removed for separate consideration.
I'll second that.
I like to have J4 pulled.
J4,
I wouldn't say I'd like to have it pulled, but I need L2 pulled.
okay. Elizabeth,
Yes, separate roll call, please, for J8.
okay. Anyone else?
Okay, I'd like to make a motion to approve. All right, regular voting meeting agenda, except for items J4, J8, L2. You have a second on that?
May we get a second, please?
Second.
Roger. All right, Tracy, go ahead, we'll do a roll call.
Mr. Elling,
Yes.
Mr. Johnston,
Yes.
Mr. Coke,
Yes,
Ms. Lynch,
Yes.
Mr. Miller,
Yes.
Mr. Knopf,
Yes.
Mrs. Smith,
Yes.
and Mr. Strauss.
Yes.
8 yes votes, motion passes.
I'd like to make a motion to pass J4, HSE Solutions Agreement.
Say what?
What?
Nope, that's the
No.
resolution. J4 is the resolution on
J4
25,
is the
not to exceed
resolution.
the tax index. I don't know where you are.
I seriously don't know where I'm at.
I'm believing that.
I think so.
Are you on the right meeting?
I might be 2 years ago. I'm not sure. Oh, dear God. Yes, I think I am. No, 2021. Yeah.
122.
No, that's not the
2022.
right one.
Okay, so I'm wrong. one. I can make a motion to pass J4. You all can figure out which one J4 is.
It's resolution 125, not to exceed the tax
I can
index.
pull it up.
Can I get a second, please?
Second.
Roger seconded. Oh, Mrs. Long.
Mr. Johnson,
Yes.
Mr. Coke,
yes,
Ms. Lynch,
Yes. Excuse me.
Mr. Miller,
Yes.
Mr. Knopf,
No.
Mrs. Smith,
Yes.
Mr. Strauss,
Yes.
Mr. Elling.
Yes.
7 yes votes, 1 no, motion passes.
I'd like to make a motion to pass J8, the McClure Agreement.
Second.
Second it. No. All right.
Mr.
Jeff
Johnson
got that
you.
one.
No fighting.
Uh,
Mr. C-
Oh, no, I'm sorry, and I should have asked for the last one. I apologize, Mr. Knopf. In discussion or questions, this is regarding the McClure, the replacement of, was this the chillers, I believe?
Yeah, that's what I think it is. too.
And so not to exceed $357,467. Have all board members been able to ask questions about this and get the information that they wanted? If they had any questions?
Mhm.
Okay, Mrs. Long?
Mr. Coke,
yes,
Ms. Lynch,
No.
Mr. Miller,
Yes.
Mr. Knopf,
Yes.
Mrs. Smith,
Yes.
Mr. Strauss,
No.
Mr. Elling,
Yes.
Mr. Johnston.
Yes.
6 yes votes, 2 no.
I'd like to make a motion to pass L2.
Second that.
Any discussion? Questions? This is the
LHU
intern,
intern.
LHU intern agreement.
Go figure. I wonder why he's.
Yeah, I wonder why, I wonder why he wants this.
All right, Mrs. Long.
Ms. Lynch,
Absolutely, yes. Very excited.
Mr. Miller,
I wish I could be a yes, but respectfully, I have to abstain. And now I got to fill out the form.
Mr. Knopf,
Yes.
Mrs. Smith,
Yes.
Mr. Strauss.
Yes.
Mr. Elling,
Yes.
Mr. Johnson,
Yes.
Mr. Coe.
Yes.
7 yes, 1 abstention.
All right, thank you.
President, I'd like to make a motion to adjourn.
Second it.
All right, thank you,
I'm
everyone.
right on that one.
Meeting adjourned. Thank you, everyone.